Okay, so I got the back door off. One thing to note, sometimes with these jukeboxes or even in pinball machines, you have to take the weight off of the locking mechanism in order for the lock to turn. So with this particular jukebox, you have to pick up on the rear door and then the lock is able to turn, instead of forcing it and bending the lock and the keys and crap like that. Something else I had to fix on this. These are the 20 trays back here. You can see the 20 trays in the back here. They all worked except for number 3 tray. And I noticed these fingers, one finger here and number 3 finger, was slightly bent out just a little bit. These are just have slight bit of tension on them because there's a little, you really can't see it, but there's a little lever back there, or that catches on a tray over here. And anyway, the number 3 finger was slightly bent out, and instead of taking this off and trying to bend it back, and I'm afraid of screwing up something else on these other fingers, I just loosened up the bar here, and I had an old pinball leaf point. I just cut it and I just put it in back here on the number 3 finger and tighten these back up, and it's been working beautifully since I did that. I also, a lot of the screws were slightly loose on these, so I checked all the screws throughout the whole mechanism and made sure they were snug where they were supposed to be snug. Another thing I noticed was back here, these bearings. There's one here and another one. I don't have the flashlight with me, but you can see the one bearing here and there's another one right back there, and they were very tight. I mean, I could barely get them to turn with my fingers. So I took off those 2 bearings. Now let it sit overnight in diesel fuel or diesel oil. You know, if you're using tractors or if you have a home heating oil, it's the same thing, diesel fuel. And I let it sit overnight, and that did the trick. It loosened up really, and it worked really smooth the next day. Then I just dried it off, put it back on, and I used that light machine oil on there again. And there were some other little bearings like that in the mechanism over here. So I ended up oiling all the pivot points, all the bearings, everything else. Even the mech motor here, a couple of drops on each side, a few drops on each side to oil it up. And let me see if I can get a flashlight. Okay, got a flashlight. So back here, you could see those 2 bearings I was talking about. And they were really stiff. The other place where you may not realize where to put some oil is, this is right in there. You'll see these little holes in the mechanism in various places, and I put a few drops of oil in there as well. And so this shaft turns inside this housing. So I think you're supposed to put a few drops of oil in there as well. I think that's what it has on the lubrication chart too. So throughout the mechanism, you'll see these little holes in various castings, and I always throw a few drops of oil in there. And there's a better look at the point I added to that. And there's the receivers and the amplifiers. It's kind of hard to see, but then there's the coin mech. I also put on a new electric wire to the outlet. The original was so dried, the slightest bend in the insulation would just fall right off. So originally, the original one went to this 2-prong outlet, which I left in place. I just took the wires out and left it in place because I put a 3-prong in, and I put a female connector on here. Then I ran another cable from here into the selection receiver. I also put a ground on it. The original did not have a ground. I'm not sure if that ground is going to cause the wireless wall box to not work, It could be that, or it could be that the receiver needs to be rebuilt with, it needs to be recapped. But anyway, it's just on a screw. So if I have problems with the wireless wall box, I'll just loosen this up and take the ground wire off and see if it works. But it'll probably be because it needs to be recapped. Another point to make is I've got the Seeburg reference book from Always Jukin', or Harold Hagen, whatever it is. Anyway, in there was one tip. It was well worth the cost of the book alone just for this one tip. It said that if you don't have your units, your receiver and amplifier units rebuilt, that you should take out the 2050 tube and the 5Y3 tube. And that will help prevent the transformers or some other electronics burning up because the units have not been rebuilt. So that's what I did. I took them out and I put electrical tape over the connectors so they wouldn't get dust and dirt in there. Eventually I will rebuild them. Either I'll take it someplace to be rebuilt or I'll redo it myself. I have done recap and resistor and replace the resistors on other jukeboxes before. It's a lot of work. I used to mail them out as well sometimes to a guy, but I prefer not to do that too much. If they get lost in the mail, then you're going to have a hard time finding these receivers and amplifiers again. So I'd rather either drive it someplace or just do it myself. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, I was having one problem where it would play, let's say it was playing a record, comes to the end, and you made another selection, it would slide back the one record and pull out your new selection and then stop and not continue on. It was working erratically with the selections and when it would stop and stop the motor and all the rest of that stuff. And instead of screwing around with adjustments and everything else, I was looking back over here, and this is the one switch that allows the motor to start and stop. Sorry about the lighting. It is right there. So what was happening was this had a lot of oil on it. So when it was supposed to stop the motor, the oil was shorting out the points and causing the motor to continue to run a little bit longer than it should have. So what I did was I just shut the jukebox off and I took the points out. I didn't unsolder them or anything else like that. I just got them loose and I used alcohol to clean them off. And I let it sit for a couple hours to dry because alcohol is flammable. After it dried, I put it back on, made sure they were adjusted appropriately, and then everything worked beautifully. So that's it. Let's play it now and you can hear how it sounds and see how the mechanism works. Let me make a selection. Let's try that one. Now it puts the previous record back, takes the one I just selected out, raises the turntable up to meet the tone arm, starts to play. Cancel this one out. Cancel that one out. You'll see how it puts that one back, and it's picking up our next selection. Slides it back over the turntable. Turntable is rising up.